Welcome to the Naked Podcaster. I'm your host, Jen Taylor. A huge shout out and thank you to NGBN TV for sponsoring this video podcast. Today we're hearing from MJ Preston. He discusses what it was like growing up with a dad who was a bank robber, knowing his dad tried to murder his mom, going to school under an assumed name, marrying his love, and becoming a long-haul truck driver, including on the world's largest ice road, where he wrote some of his best-selling books in his mind. Welcome to the Naked Podcaster. I'm super excited. Today I have MJ Preston on. MJ, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Where in the world are you located?
I live in Alberta, Canada, so just above Montana.
Right. Love it. I've been through that. So everything will be in the show notes, but your website is mjpreston.net, so your name.net, pretty easy. Let's jump in and really talk about this website, as well as you are also on wildbluepress.com, and that will also be in the show notes. And that has a really great bio about you. So jump in and tell us all things MJ.
Okay, well, MJ Preston, that's my, I guess you would say not pseudonym, but that's my pen name as I go by. I'm a writer, and I write in a couple of different genres. I write in horror, sci-fi, and thriller. And I've been writing for a lot of years, but in 2012, I published my first novel, and now I'm up to my fourth. So that's who MJ Preston is. I mean, I'm a Canadian. I love to write. I'm an amateur photographer. I take lots of pictures, and a little bit of an adventure too.
Yeah, I think your life has been an adventure, but we'll get into that. So you have three genres. Can you go into each one of those? And I mean, I know through your past and through your story, we're going to learn why you chose these genres. Are they kind of related in your mind?
Well, I think for me, they are. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Horror touches science fiction, right? And
yeah.
and horror definitely can touch crime thriller. So yeah, I think they all can interact. Maybe science fiction can, unless Steven Spielberg is involved or something. I don't know.
Right.
But anyway, so that's, yeah, they all work for me. I'm probably not the guy that's going to write the great American novel, of Mice and Men or anything like that. I love literature, but I liked getting down and dirty in the stuff that I do.
I really kind of like that. That's very awesome. You have really incredible reviews, and reviews are a hard thing to come by, but you were on LA Talk Radio, San Francisco Review of Books. You've gotten some really amazing feedback, and I have yet to read one of your books. So I find it really fascinating that you've gotten great feedback about these. And tell me a little bit about that, because your first book you said was 2012.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote before that, but as far as publishing a novel, yes, I published it in 2012. Well, I was lucky enough. Look, back in the day, and I'm one of those guys that used to type on a typewriter instead of a computer. So, back in the day, you had to work your butt off to try and not give them this basically flawless manuscript, send it, and then it ends up in a big slush pile, and you don't have an agent, and nobody wants to touch you, blah, blah, blah. We live in a little bit better world with the electronic age now, and I think it's opened things up an awful lot. But when I finished my first manuscript, I struggled very hard to try and publish it, not independently, but send it to an actual publisher, and got rejections. They say, you got to have an agent, man. I said, oh, okay. Then you try and get an agent. It's like, oh, who are you? So anyways, I published that first book independently, and it ended up, I said, what the heck, I'll throw it in the Amazon Breakthrough Awards. And it made it to semifinalists, and it was a horror novel, and it caught me some notoriety. And so, that's where I kind of started down this road. And I didn't think I'd publish another novel. And then all of a sudden I went on an adventure up in the north, and it said, hey man, this is a great place to write a novel about. So I wrote my second novel. And then from that point, I started something completely different, which was a crime thriller. And I decided, somebody recommended Wild Blue Press to me, and I thought, well, I'm going to go old school. I'll just submit it to them. Took a little while, but they came back and they said, you know what? We love that book. We want the next book, and we want to take your 2 independent books. We want to roll them into our docket as well. So it was like, wow. So
Wow.
the weird thing is that because this is over the course of about 5 years, but all of a sudden there's this resurgence for all of these 4 books. So when people say to me, what book are you pumping? Well, I'm pumping all 4 because they all just came out with Wild Blue Press, and they've gone on to venues and onto platforms they haven't been before.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people start out trying to get a publisher and then end up self-publishing. And you did the opposite.
Yeah, well, I wanted to, because I found out the struggles of being an independent author.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you flip the bill for everything, right? And
Yeah.
it's not so much the bill end of it, but you don't have anybody to back you up on the promotion. You got to get out, you know. I mean, now I have a publicist and I'm with a great publisher, but you know, when I was out there on my own, it was doing everything. You're out there beating the bushes and you're begging, you know, come on, please read my book, give me an honest review. And it's a tough gig, you know, but
Yep.
you have to love it to do it, because sometimes it's you know, it can be punishment too to you. Like, it's a lot of hard work for sure.
Well, yes. So I think, and there's a difference, and I definitely want to get into this with you. It can be now or later in the podcast, but I'm a writer. I've published 1 book. I'm working on a 2nd book. I've done lots of blogs and articles and all kinds of stuff. There's a point in time where that shifts gear and you become an author, which that's a career. So you made that shift somewhere along the way where you went from writing to having this be your career. And that's I think that's tough to do. So kudos to you for being able to do that. Because like you said, you're out there pounding pavement and begging for reviews are the hardest thing to get.
But here's the thing about that is that I still subsidize my income because it's an uphill battle with writing. I mean, this is the thing I think a lot of writers don't, or young aspiring writers, they all want to write that big Stephen King novel. I mean, I know I did when I was a young guy. That's what I wanted to do. But the reality of it is most writers, you know, they have to have a second job. But you know what? They're doing what they love, and that's the main thing. And I think I'll quote Stephen King. He said, "If you're doing it for the money, you're a monkey," because it's a hard, you know, vocation to be in, for lack of a better word at the moment. But you know, but you have to love it. And the thing is, the joy it brings me, the creation, storytelling, you know, and then having people come back to you and tell you, hey, I really love, you know, really dug that. That was very cool. That's the fulfillment right there. And for me, like I say, it's not about celebrity. I mean, it's nice to make a couple of bucks, don't get me wrong, but it's about plugging into that receptacle, because that's why you sit there and you write on there, is because you want to get it to that reader. And if you did that, you accomplished your mission. And if they enjoyed it, bonus. I mean, that's why you did it. You know, the other stuff comes along with it. That's great too, but that's the focus for me anyways.
I have a theory that when you're working a job and also living a passion like you are as an author, that job is the vehicle that allows you to live your passion without having the stress of an income coming directly from it. And I think sometimes when we put all of that pressure on that one dream, it's not nearly as fun anymore. But for me, if I could just work a job or do something or freelance over here and not be super emotionally connected, then I get to live the things that I'm passionate about and just love them.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, with me, I spent 12 years in the military. Then I became a long haul truck driver. Then I ended up going on to going into the north, the ice roads and stuff like that. But how I wrote is every time that truck stopped, laptop comes out, goes on top of steering wheel, tap, 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 you know, but you have to love that to do it. And I do love it. I mean, the thing is when I go into one of these things, I get lost in the story, and it's cool because I'm the first guy on the scene of the crime, right? Hey, look at what we can do, you know, so that's a lot of fun. And it's like I say, it's a journey going all the way through it, and some of it's tough, you know, as you know, you've written a book, and but that's why you keep going. Now compile that on to the fact I was doing 16-hour days, and then I'd stop and do that, you know, and work for 2 hours on it. And then on the weekends when the guys are out, you know, boozing or whatever, I'm behind the laptop working. But that's how much I love this craft. I've always been an artistic person, and that, you know, that's the thing that's given me levity throughout my life. So anyhow.
I was going to ask you about it because I knew that you were a truck driver, and I didn't know if you did, because you can do voice memos and talk to text
Right
on your phone. And I thought, wow, if you could really hook into a decent system where you could, like, I write myself emails through via text,
Sure.
you know, via talking. And that's how I remember stuff. And so you didn't do it that way, though.
No, I can't. I can't write like that. I can't do that process. I tried it. And the other thing, my problem is and I always get beat up by a friend of mine when I say this, but I'm mealy mouthed, right? I would start saying something, then the computer get all screwed up. And I'm already bad enough that I got to go back and edit the heck out of everything. So what I was doing, I tried voice to text. I mean, and it works for some people very well, by the way, but it just doesn't work for me. There's something about taking my fingers and touching them to the keyboard.
All right.
And then I just go into this zone and I just start going, and that's it. So any other way doesn't quite work.
I love that everybody has their own process. And so we just gave people several tips where, no, you do all your thinking and then you have to sit down and type. If I want to really, really, really remember something and it's important, I physically, like, I have sticky notes and notepads and journals all over the place, because there's something to me about the physical writing out of things on a piece of paper. And you just said, like, you touch your fingers to the keyboard and there it is. And then also the ability to do talk to text or an interview style to write your book. And, like, there's no wrong way.
No. Oh, no, absolutely not.
Like, so that's great.
Yeah. So, I mean, some people outline, some people write by the seat of their pants. For me, I write by the seat of my pants.
I outline.
Yeah. And you know what? I've just started a series of 2 books. And when I got into the second book, I was going, you know, I really should do an outline, but I can't do outlines, because what happens is I find it stifles the creativity. It's just like, let's go start writing. You know, it doesn't matter what kind of a disaster or debris trail you're leaving behind you, because you're going to be circling back and cleaning it up anyways, right?
Yep.
So that's what works for me. And but it's funny. And then, you know, but I will confess, I have a research assistant out of Florida who's helped me with 2 of my books, and I've had to go back to her, and because one of the books is about a serial killer, and I'm scratching my head and I'm going, Patty, how many guys did he kill? And she would have like a kill list for me, right? Because and otherwise I'd be going back, you know, page 42, page 36, whatever, trying to add this up, So anyhow. But
that was my next question. Yeah. How do you keep track of the stories? Because honestly, you'd think you do intimately know your stories.
Yeah.
But you also have 3 different genres you're writing, and each one of those is a series. And honestly, it is totally normal to get lost in your own story and not recollect facts. And I asked someone else, and she did an Excel spreadsheet. And I'd want to kill myself if I had to do, like, that is not my process. But for her, she had each book in the series and, like, the kill list, the details on it. So it's really easy for her to go back, because you have to constantly do that as a writer moving forward. So
actually, I will just correct you there. Only the one, the crime thriller is a series. The other 2 are standalone novels. However, I mean, it's like I said, you know, my problem is, if I turn the camera around right now, you looked at my desk, it's a disaster area. Okay. And the reason it's a disaster area, because I don't know why, but that's the way I operate. But there's some kind of sense that comes out of all that chaos. I mean, I'm not saying that somebody's going to say he's got to be on Hoarders. I'm not like that, but my track, it's a messy zone, but I'm comfortable with that, because I'll take a book, you know, look, I got a book sitting here. I'll just reach over, just grab it quickly, and then I'll reference something, and then I'll go, oh, okay, over that goes there, and that's it. Sorry, a little bit of reverb there, but that's kind of my writing too. I mean, I write linear, but like I say, I just go at this weird rate, and then I go back, and I mean, and I'll go back and go, oh, that doesn't make sense. Who the hell wrote this? You know, but I mean, but it somehow in the end it all works out.
So maybe my saying that you have 3 genres and they're all series was a premonition. I'm manifesting. I don't know. Let's take a look back in time at life. You're in Canada, you said, in Alberta. So yeah. you were born there. That's where you've born and raised.
No, I was born in a place called outside Montreal, Quebec. You know where Montreal
is? Oh yeah,
is.
I do. I'm from Vermont, so.
Oh okay. Oh, there you go. I've been to Vermont. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I've been to Montreal.
Anyway. Well, I hope you had a Montreal smoked meat sandwich, because you can't beat those.
I didn't.
Oh, you got to have one when you go back.
Okay, all right.
That's their staple. That's their staple. Anyhow, yeah. So I was born in Montreal. My mom and dad were married at the time, and I had 2 older brothers. And anyways, early on, and I was very young. I was only 3 at the time, but 2 of my brothers went down to the St. Lawrence River, and the ice broke, and one was swept away.
Oh.
And so that was a pretty devastating thing on our family. I was young enough that I wasn't affected, or I adapted better. My older brother had a very tough time with it. Of course, my mother had a tough time with it. But right around that time too, now, and this is, I don't think, I've never said this publicly, but my father was a bank robber, and he was on the lam from the cops, so he couldn't make it to the funeral because the cops had the funeral staked out. And anyway, so that took a heavy toll, especially so much more my brother and my mother, and of course my father as well. Even so, I mean, even though he was into what he was into, he he still loved his kids,
right?
Somewhat, anyways. So we kind of lived a really fluid life for the first few years of my life. At one point, my brother and I were going to school under an assumed name because my father was on the lam from the cops. At another point, when my grandfather passed away, my brother went up to stay with my grandmother. So I was down alone with my mom and my dad. And they said, hey, we're going to Boston for a holiday. Well, yeah, we went to Boston for a holiday, but it was because he was on the lam from the cops, right? So we hung out in a hotel. We didn't know any better. So he had a real rough streak in him, and eventually the marriage came apart. He played around a lot, stuff like that, and so my mom and dad shipped us off up to Montreal, because we were actually living in Hamilton, Ontario at the time, and we stayed with an aunt and uncle for a year. And that was a transformation of sorts, because, when you look back on things like that, you don't think, hey, I'm not dysfunctional, right? But when you look back on it, you think it's dysfunctional when you look back from an adult's eyes. But at that time, that was the norm. That's what was going on. So my mom, she met another guy, and he was a decent man. And she was getting ready to go to British Columbia, to the other end of the place, to get away from my father, because he was a pretty rough guy, like I say. And they ended up in a bar, and my father came in with a gun, and he took them out at gunpoint. He was going to murder them, but there was a huge police takedown at that time. They rolled into an intersection, and that's what he was doing. He was taking them out to execute them. And so they rolled in, and they arrested my father, and he went away. And then my mother went with the man she met, who was a decent guy out there, and eventually they brought us back out to British Columbia, and I got to grow up in British Columbia, which was fantastic, a nice place. And
how old were you when the whole bar scene happened?
I was in kindergarten at that point.
Do you remember?
Oh yes, I knew what was going on. Like, I mean, we weren't, well, wait a minute, I'll back the truck up. Sure. We didn't know that what happened with my mother, my father, and who would eventually be my stepfather. We didn't know what, they never told us about that because we were young. That happened while we were up at our grandmother's, upstate with my aunt. They didn't tell us till later, like when we got a little bit older. But my father, and he's dead now, by the way,
Okay.
He wandered in and out a few times. I think with him, what probably, I think the only thing I could hold him in contempt for is that he didn't go to his kid's funeral because he was on the lam from the cops. Because I don't care. I'd crawl over broken glass,
Yeah.
do whatever for my kids. So, but he ended up coming out to British Columbia once, and just coincidentally, the Royal Bank of Canada got robbed when he happened to be in town, and we're pretty sure that he did it. And like I say, but he came from a very abusive and dysfunctional family as well. And when I looked back on that, that's kind of where I made a connect, and I came to terms with it, that it, like, I spent a lot of time angry at him, and I did reacquaint with him when he got older. My mom forgave him, and they actually, over all of that, I mean, he went to jail too. So, and but the thing was, he had this bitter streak in him, and he eventually passed away. But I was able to come to terms with it because I got to look at a little bit of the history, and I know that his father abandoned all their kids, right? But before he did that, and I got this from relatives, they abused him, and the father, and beat him, and stuff like that. And he was in reform school from 12, so he was kind of made to be what he is. And thankfully, my mother got us away from that atmosphere, so we didn't become in the next cycle. But yeah, we had tough times, but I never looked at them that way, because when you get to a certain point in your life, you can either, be in sorrow over this, or you can do something with it. And the way I look at it is that I'm a writer, and that's what I was put on this earth to do. And part of being a writer is being a voyeur and watching, but also you look inward. And I look at all of those things, and I wouldn't be the person that I am. I know that sounds cliche, if I hadn't gone through all that shit back in those days. And my brother, even with all the bad things that happened, the good things that happened along the way is the fact that my one brother passed away, or died drowned. My other older brother was my protector my whole life. And I have a good memory from that, from a Halloween, seeing we're coming up to Halloween. I'll throw this out. I got mugged by a couple of boys that were much bigger than me and my brother. And, they pushed me down, took my bag, off they went. And my brother came down, gave me his bag, said, "Wait here." And he took off, and he came back with the bag. And so I guess he convinced them to hand the bag over. And after he did that, the next day they came to me at school and they apologized. So, he's been my hero through my whole life. And so there's really good things that we did, and I had lots of adventures, and you know what, that molded me as the person I am now. So
At what age or at what point you knew, like, when I read your little bullet points, I was like, my dad was a bank robber, and I was like, wow. I mean, it sounds like a movie, like my dad was at what age did you realize that? And like, was it talked about at all? Is that where money came
yeah.
from?
Well, no, I mean, I don't think I had a concept of the money end of it, but I mean, I watched TV every week, so I knew what a bank robber was, and I knew,
Right.
and it came up. I mean, my brother probably filtered it to me first, right? And I don't think I really talked to my mom about it, but you know, once the cat was out of the bag, you start to see things and understand things. And I mean, my father used to go meet people down on docks with us kids, like it is like something out of a gangster movie. Exactly. Eh? When I look back on it now, and I laugh, because I think, what were we doing down there? Eh? Or, but I didn't get exposed to anything that, like, I didn't see anything terrible that would cause post-traumatic stress disorder or anything like that. It was just a weird, dysfunctional way to be brought up.
Yeah.
And I never, the one thing I never did is I never dragged it as an anchor behind me. I didn't. And I think that's probably just because of how I'm made up. But I'm not saying that it didn't affect other people in my life. It affected my mom her whole life until the day she died. She mourned for our brother. And certainly it's affected my brother even to this day, because he was there when it happened. But I think it made us all the more tighter in the end too, is that, you know, like that, my brother, I don't, you know, miss a week without getting down, calling him, seeing how he's doing, and same thing. And you know, we have a boys' night out once in a while. Well, when the bars open up eventually, you know, where we go out and blow some steam off, not like a couple old idiots, because that's what we look like now, right? So, but it's you know, I I've always had that perspective. Maybe I'm like Forrest Gump with the little feather behind me, and I'm just bouncing through life happily. I don't know. So, but also, I mean, I draw from many of my experiences, and that's where I focus it into my writing too. So,
Mom moved across Canada, remarried with your stepdad, and you said he was a decent guy. So was that a good relationship? Your dad was gone. He was in prison for 10 years.
well, he got 10 years. He got out in 6.
Okay.
Um, he so and he kind of did his own thing there for a long time. He didn't, you know, uh and this, my stepfather was a really decent guy, and I have to say that he played a big hand in raising us, but the relationship was doomed from the beginning because my mother had still not put her life in order, and it in the end it sabotaged their relationship, and the two of them split, and he went off and married somebody else. So, you know, but I mean, I have to credit him for, you know, he stuck it in, and you know, we didn't grow up with much money. We were poor,
Yeah.
you know. So and they did what they could, and he was, I mean, he was a logger, and he, you know, he worked he worked, you know, and then he was home in the I remember being in the winter time, and we didn't have a lot of money because he'd have to go on EI because they get you know, they get laid off for the winter. And he was watching Saturday Night Live one night, I guess. So this is the first time he saw Saturday Night Live, where they had the, you know, the stamping machine where you put the prices on it, but it was a commercial saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to show you how to lower prices at a grocery store." And he thought it was a real commercial because he was from the Czech Republic, or like he was from Czechoslovakia, right? So there were desperate times, like for food. It was pretty crazy, you know.
Yeah.
I remember my mom saying to me one day when she came home, she said, "We had to eat shit to get this food." And
Yeah.
I said, "What?" And I said, "Mom, what kind of shit did she have to eat?" And she started laughing. But I mean, there were tough times, and then, you know, and but they did the best they could. We had Christmases every year. Uh, you know, my father, he wasn't there. I didn't reconnect with him until I was an adult, and even then, he was still a very broken person. And I've just kind of put it in its place that you know, that's the way he ended up. I just tried never to duplicate it with my own children or grandchildren.
I love that from a really young age, you were realizing somehow that not to drag that as an anchor behind you, using your words, which I think are really fantastic, that, you know, you saw all of the positive in what was happening, even though it was really tough, and you didn't want to drag that anchor through your life.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I mean, I'm not saying that I came through unscathed because I didn't. You know, I
Right.
had my own trials and tribulations, but for the most part, it, I guess it's like I'd rather be happy than unhappy, and it's not shutting it out, but there's some stuff in there that you can look back on and really laugh at. I do remember saying to my father, you know, because he said, "I'm losing my hearing." I said, "Oh, maybe you should go after the bank robbers union there and see if their pension guys will get you some hearing aids." You know, and he actually thought it was funny, right? So I mean, but that I have a black sense of humor too,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's why I write in the genres that I do, and it may be even a little bit of the kind of life that we lived when we were young,
Mm-hmm.
and to go into those genres because you know, I always dug the monsters, Frankenstein's monster, you know, the outsider, the outcast. Eh?
Yeah.
The one nickname I used to have as a kid, and I just cringed the other day because I think somebody slapped it on the president, and it's not. I don't want to get political, but my parents used to call me Nowhere Man, and it was because I used to always just stare off and daydream because I was thinking
Okay.
about stories, right? And I used to, and the other thing I did I didn't mention when I was a kid is I used to carry around a binder, and I always wrote stories in it. Always had, you know, these rudimentary drawings of the things, lots of plagiarism, you know,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it, but I mean, that's where it was always there. And a lot of my friends couldn't understand why I didn't want to go out and kick a soccer ball around the field because, you know, this is what I was digging to do. They thought it was okay. Like my friends were pretty good with it, but they couldn't, why, you know, we sit in school all day long and you want to sit there and draw pictures and write stories. And, you know, when we could be over there playing football or doing something else, right? So, but that's, I just dug it. It was, and it's an escape too. It's, you know, it's just like
Yes.
reading a book. You forget the world around you and you go into that world.
I feel like a lot of us that grew up in really tough situations, if we had a love of reading or writing, that was a big escape. And other people got into sports, and that was a big escape. I mean, there are lots of things that you can love and enjoy and also are an escape from your reality.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
definitely reading and writing is a fantastic escape. And you grew up and um, you wanted to get a degree in writing.
Yeah, actually, my initial thought was I want to be a foreign correspondent. I want to be a journalist.
Uh-huh.
So I wanted to go off, maybe do, you know, be a war correspondent. I wanted to learn, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, this is how you do it, man. This is, you're going to become a writer if you can turn around and go be a war correspondent and get a good gig. But the problem is I just didn't have the dough, and I was back in college, and I met this young lady, and she was just beautiful. I mean, she was gorgeous. She had blue eyes, blonde hair. And I'm
Yeah,
looking
well,
across the room, I'm like, yeah, she's so out of my league, eh? But I took a shot, and while we're together today, we had, you know, we have 3 kids, uh, but we were young parents, you know, and so I was working for $4 an hour in a car wash when I was, you know, 19 years old, and trying to go to school at the same time, and it's like just it was impossible. So I had to look, and then we had a kid, and you know, so we have the kid, and I'm making, you know, nothing for money, and I said, you know what, I got to have some kind of basis of a career, so I ended up joining the Canadian military,
hmm
and so, and still thinking in my mind, yes, I can go back to school, but also I can, you know, I can write maybe in the military. Let's do something with that, and I can build on that. And I did. I ended up doing a lot of writing in the military, but I was a combat soldier. I never saw combat. I trained for it the whole time, but I never did. Pardon me, it's the soda's just getting me here.
It's all right.
Anyhow, but that's where I started. That first novel was being, you know, I'd be down in the basement clacking away on an old Olivetti typewriter, and I got the manuscript probably about half done, something like that, and it had it in a 3-ring binder. I put it in a box, and I ended up shelving it for 12 years. You know,
Wow.
and yeah, but the thing was, is just life got in the way. Here comes a baby. Here comes another baby. Here comes another baby. Soldiers don't make a lot of money, but
Yeah.
you know, here I'm gone 9 months of the year on exercises, and you know, and doing all sorts of stuff or courses, and you know, and I was moving up, trying to move up the ranks in the military as well. And I made it to Master Corporal, which is a junior NCO, and I loved my job. You know, and I almost focused where I said, I think I can be a soldier and be happy without the writing. Although I still kept writing, I was writing reportage and stuff like that, but I didn't have to be Stephen King or
Right.
Or Tom Clancy or like that. And that was working great. And then I got to my 12th year, and after my third leg operation, they said, "See ya, you got to go. You can't do this anymore."
What happened with your leg?
Well, I have a thing called compartment syndromes in the legs. Happens to athletes and soldiers. Is just because you know, you put the muscle on your lower leg through such punishment, and I ended up getting these hernias in my leg, and what that is caused by is a thing called compartment syndromes, and just the pressure in the muscle builds up and it breaks the outer fascia. So every time I got one of these, I went and got an operation, and then finally, when it happened, like I had 3 operations over the course of 12 years. And when I went back the last time, the orthopedic surgeon said, you know what, you got to find another job. This is it. He says, if we keep operating, you're going to be in a wheelchair. That's all there is to it. You're going to be so debilitated because of scar tissue. So that ended my career in the military. And again, we went, my wife and me and my kids, we went through a tough bout. I got out. I ended up suffering deep, deep depression because I lost all my identity all of a sudden. So I went through about a year, and anyways, I found my way out, and certainly my rock of Gibraltar were my wife and my kids. They stood by me through thick and thin, no matter how crummy I was, and I was crummy at times. You know, I mean, you snap at the kids or like that, but it was. I had to reinvent myself yet again and figure out what to do, and that's how I ended up going to truck driving, and that that was just like I say, and so when I look back on that now. I don't look back on it with any amount, and there was some dark times in there too, but I don't look back on that in any way that is negative, because that's just another stepping stone to where I am now. And I'm a pretty serene guy now. So, but at any rate, we spent a year trying to figure out what the heck I was going to do. I went through depression. I managed to get a handle on that. I ended up going out on the road trucking, and it only rekindled my relationship with my wife, which wasn't in dire straits, but it brought that romance back. It was like, oh, we realized we love each other again. Get rid of the kids when I come home, that sort of deal.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was good. And along the way, like I say, I trucked all over the United States, down to Florida and, Texas and everywhere. That's why I said Vermont. I've been through Vermont many times. I used to run all of the Eastern Seaboard. And anyway, and that's somehow along the way, I'm still trucking. And that's when I stumbled on that manuscript I told you about that I put away. And I thought, well, I should really try and finish this. And boom, that's what I did. And so that's how I got here, really. And as I said, along the way, I'm a little bit of an adventurer. Well, I went up and I ran the ice roads in the north.
Yeah, I wanted you to talk about that. And also there's something cathartic. I mean, first of all, you pulled the book out of the box after 12 years and found it. Did you get it digital? Did you go to a computer from your
typewriter? I mean, I had a computer at that point. And yeah, so I had to, that was a tough one because I had to transcribe everything, right? But here's the deal. When I wrote the first draft of that, and that would be back in the 80s or late 80s, there were no cell phones.
No.
Computers were like, well, maybe we were past VIC 20 or whatever, but they were like the Macintosh was just starting out. There was no Windows 95 or nothing like that. So I had to update the whole story too, because it was like, holy cow. How are these guys communicating? They can't go to a payphone in today's day and age, right? Like this. So yeah, that was a lot of labor, but you know what? I had no idea where that story would go. And then once I got rolling on it, once I got past the transcribing part, it just took off. And the funny thing about that is I have a good friend, and his name's Jim Steele, but his pen name is R. James Steele, and he's a historical writer. And he was my mentor. And I asked him, I said, listen, I'm thinking about starting this novel. Could I send you a chapter and you look at it? And he said, yeah. So about 3 weeks go by, I've rewritten this chapter 19, 20 times because I'm scared of what he's going to say. And I sent it to him, and he sends it back, and I can say something explicitly on here, so I'm going to. I said to him, I said, geez, he said, that's great. I loved it. He says, we clean up the grammar later. And he said, why did it take you so long to get it to me? And I said, because I was shitting my pants. Like that you're going to tell me that you go home, you're a fraud, and he said, Mark, just write the fucking thing. And that was it. And that has been my motto ever since, is just write the thing, get it done. And he's the one that set me down that road. So that's where we got to Equinox, and that I started on that. After I wrote Equinox, I was getting ready to hang up my trucking skates. I was like, I've got to have a home job. Because I want to focus on this writing thing, promoting this new book that I just got out. And a friend of mine called me up and said, hey, why don't you go out and run the ice roads? And he says, that
Okay.
way you, and he said, that's where you'll cap off your career, right? I said, oh, okay. I guess I could try that, right? So I got on an airplane and flew to Alberta, got in there in a great big company called Ventures West. It was a fantastic company, great people, and we were driving Super B tankers, which is 2 tankers attached to the back of a rig.
Mhm.
So we went up there, and I went up there. Everybody talks about this ice road if you've seen the show, and I was not on the show. I was in a documentary which is on Tubi, a little brief flash of us. But everybody thinks the ice is the most terrifying thing because it's the cracking and the popping, and it does that when you're driving up it. But the most terrifying thing is the road that where it was. It's much improved now, but when I got there in 2012, it was a road called the Ingram Trail, and it's a winding, twisting, icy, gravelly road that goes up and down, and you're almost clicking mirrors with the opposing truck. That's how close you are.
Yeah.
And so, and it's about 30 miles up this road, and we go up there, and I'm driving, and I'm just, but I'm not trying, don't want to look scared. This is my friend, right? But I'm following him, and he's taking me. He taught me up the road, and when we got up to the top, I peeled my fingers off the steering wheel, and the anxiety of this road. And he came out. He was so excited because this guy had been friends with him for a long time, and he said, "How was it?" I said, "Well, I didn't get killed, but it scared the shit out of me." And he said, "Well, get ready because we got 20 more of them to do." So we did them, and it took me a long time to get, it took me about probably 10 trips up that road before I finally got to understand how everything worked. Because what you're doing is you're pulling all this weight in these 2 trailers up this icy grade. You get on the other side, and all of a sudden those 2 trailers are pushing you down that icy grade. And at the bottom, there's a hard right-hand turn. And you think you're going to, if you don't get it under control, you could lose it. And not only that, but you have opposing trucks coming the other way very close. Everybody's talking on the radio, calling markers and stuff like that. But what that did is I got up there, and that was my kickoff to my second novel. And the reason being is it is the most beautiful place
Mm-hmm.
on the face of the earth. And you've been to Alaska, so you know the aurora borealis,
Yeah.
and there's just something that is just so majestic about all that frozen, and the animals. And I've driven a truck and had a pack of wolves running beside my truck, like literally running right beside the truck till they decide to get off. I'll be driving down like on the ice road there. You're driving along, you feel like somebody's watching. You look out the window, and all of a sudden there's a bird like this,
Yeah.
and a raven, and he's looking at you like, I want some of your lunch. So it was just inspiring, and I got to take lots of photography up there, and that set me on fire to write a second book. And I went back for 2 more seasons and did it again. I almost want to go back up just for the heck of it because of what I did. But I met guys up there that became brothers, and they're brothers for life. And some of them became very, very close because of it. And we went up there. We got trapped at the mine for 5 days because a Category 3 storm came in and wiped out the entire ice road. So, they had to come back. They had to come 300 kilometers to dig us out and make a new road. So it was just such an adventure. It was so much fun. Sometimes it just scared the crap out of you, but at other times it was just wonderful. You had so much fun.
In my 10 years of living in Alaska, I have to say it is my favorite place that I have ever lived. The most beautiful and most incredible people, and also the hardest place I have ever lived.
Oh yeah.
And it's interesting when you're in that climate, that it can be the best, most amazing, and the most difficult at the same time. And unless you've really experienced that kind of doesn't make sense. And to be in 49 below, or that's the coldest I was in 49 below,
Yeah.
and that was my coldest. But it is the most breathtaking, silent, like you said, the crackling. And I know what you mean. I didn't drive the ice road, but just being in that environment and hearing that, it's a different sound. People are afraid of wolves, and I'm like, oh no, when they're running alongside of you, that's a good day. That it's not necessarily scary. That's not the scary part of it, that wolves are alongside of you. You feel like it's the most empowering, powerful, feeling so in tune with nature, terrifying experience ever.
Oh no, absolutely.
So I get it. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I mean that I think that's probably the greatest adventure I ever went on. And the first year was the best year because everything was shiny and new, and
Mm.
I had my fear. But I mean, when I went up there, and I just got my son and my wife bought me like a Canon Rebel T3, so I just got a brand new camera, and I don't know crap about taking pictures, but I made it my aim that I was going to photograph everything up there. I took 10,000 pictures. I mean, I've got thousands of pictures of, and I started taking night photography. But I'll tell you, a real cool story is there's another book. It's called On Good Ice that they wrote, a guy wrote talking about the ice road.
Mhm.
And so, anyways, a year before I'm up there, I'm taking pictures, and I was up on a portage between one of the big lakes there. And so I took my night photography, and I'm taking all my equipment down. I got in the truck, which I was bobtailing, which means I didn't have a trailer. I was going up to retrieve a trailer from the mine and didn't think anything of it. I took those pictures home. A year later, that book, that On Good Ice book, comes out, and I open up the centerfold, and there I am. I'm the centerfold in the book, and I'm like, I didn't take this picture, but I took my own pictures of it and started comparing, like the aurora and everything behind me. And I found out another trucker. His name is Julian Burchell. He's probably 10 times the photographer I am. He took the picture and he sold it to the book. But he said to me, I said, when did you take that picture? He says, I was hiding behind a snowbank waiting for you to get in your truck and get out of there, right? And he said,
Wow.
as soon as you got in your truck and closed that door, he said the light was still on. That's when I clicked it. So yeah, and then it ended up in a book. So that was pretty cool. And it's quite a majestic picture. It's basically just a lone truck on a barren portage, and then behind it the aurora borealis is going across the sky. And it was, so like I met so many interesting people. Like this guy's he's a Brit. They're just people from Newfoundland, from Nova Scotia,
Mhm.
from down the United States. People that all congregate here, and they're the weirdest, most ragtag looking bunch you ever saw in your life. But
Mhm.
boy, oh boy, are they fun to hang out with, and it's a closed track, so conversations go on, and guys are ribbing each other and all sorts of things. So it's I just never. I think I love the North. I'd love to go back up there on my own terms where I wasn't saddled to a truck, and I think I probably will someday, and just go up there and shoot everything that I can with my camera, because I've just never had so much fun.
It's super lonely, and I think, the saying, a community raise a child. When you're in those environments, you get really, really very close to, like you said, like this ragtag group of people that you would
Yeah,
never throw together, that
yeah,
become best friends because you really are in it to support each other. It's very lonely, and I can't even imagine, because the ice road trucking is much more than what I experienced, but I understand that community. It's the best people I've ever met. And they're like, they are ragtag. It's a ragtag group, that's for sure. So I love that. And then what else do you do? You're on there listening to the crackling, popping in the most beautiful place, one of the most beautiful places in the world, and you're writing a book in your head.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that's what I was doing. And what the cool thing was is that we went up there with Equinox, right? And that was my first book, The Equinox. And he said, bring some books, man. We'll sell them on the road. And that's what. So we were rolling up there, that's when I put the first book into the Amazon Breakthrough Awards. And so I was watching its progress as the days are going on. But yeah, but my buddy's a master salesman, and he's, oh yeah, buy a book. Hey, don't be a creep. Buy this guy's book, But he was out there pitching the story because he'd read the book, and I was kind of being timid about it. But he sold every book I had. But like I said, and then we started talking. We said, this. I said, Brad, this is a place that you could do a diamond heist from, right? Because that's what they are. They're diamond mines up there, 3 diamond
Yeah.
mines. And I said, this place looks like a diamond heist. And he says, yeah, well, but he says, the security, because high security in these places. I said,
Mhm.
well, then we got to already steal the diamonds and have them picked up. I says, but you know what? We need something else. And he said, what's that? I said, we need an alien invasion. so,
Obviously.
so yeah, so we morphed this together. And I'm telling you, it's a giant book, but it was so much fun to write. And I published it independently, but before Wild Blue took it on, I handed it over to a screenwriter from Star Trek Voyager. His name is Gregory L. Norris. and I traded books with him. We were at a con, and he got back to me and he said, "Oh my God, I absolutely love this book." And that was cool because I was scared crapless that, oh God, this is a sci-fi guy. He writes for Star Trek. He's going to turn me to pieces. But he gave me a little bit of a kick up too. And then, of course, I meet this another person, extremely talented person, who is now a friend in my life. And like I say, this is the positivity that comes on when you do this sort of thing. You get to meet so many talented people, and it's a real cool community, the writing community. So
oh yeah.
So anyway, so that's what we did. We yapped about the ice while we were on the ice, and I came up, and then as soon as I got back to civilization, I got down to work and started writing. And within about a year, it took about a year, and the next Ice Road Acadia event was published, and then I started working on my latest stuff, or while I was kind of screwing around with it. But that's another story altogether.
And then you went into your third book. Did Highwayman, did that happen also while you were ice trekking? Did that story spring to
Actually,
life?
what happened with that is that, see, my fourth, I'll just give you the four books so
Yeah.
people know. The Equinox Acadia event was the second one, the science fiction one. And then it was Highwayman, and then 4, which is the sequel to Highwayman and the first in a series. The 4, which is my fourth book, by complete coincidence, was actually started at the same time as Acadia event.
Oh.
And Acadia event won out because of the ice road, and I had all this stuff, and I was like, oh no, I got to do this. So I did that. And then I was going to pick up on 4 again, and I was talking to a friend of mine, Philip Perrin. He says, you should write a throwaway for that. I said, what's a throwaway? He said, well, you just write a little novella and you give it away, but you use it to prop up your book. I said, that's a brilliant idea. It wasn't a brilliant idea. I started writing that, and it was a little novella called Highwayman, and it became a novel. And because I actually wrote it as a novella, and after I looked back at it, I said, it just doesn't work. There's not enough information in there. So I ended up turning that into a novel. So 4 got shelved again a second time around, and got pushed to be my fourth novel, which was by coincidence. And it was called 4 right from the beginning. So, and it led me to this series. So that was kind of cool too. But yeah, it's, I'm sorry, I lost my point there.
No, it's good. I was asking you if Highwayman, you were writing that while you were ice trucking, but you were actually writing 4 an Acadia event at the same time. And then Highwayman was like just a prequel. It was supposed to be the novella, and it turned into something, which is great. That happens.
Yeah, and so that's the rabbit hole I went down, and then all of a sudden, so Highwayman got accepted by Wild Blue Press. And so I was over the moon about that. I was very happy because, like I said, their lineup of writers is amazing. And after that got accepted, and then we're going through the editing process, and we're just about ready to kick it off. But we also did the Equinox. So we're going to kick off the Equinox and Highwayman at the same time, so they could kind of play off each other. And Steve Jackson, one of the partners in the company, says to me, so when's 4 going to be done? And I got like 3 chapters written, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know how it's going to end. And so I put myself on this self-imposed deadline, and I said, I'm going to bring it in at 3 months. And it took me 4. And Steve Jackson said to me, he said, no, he says, just write me another good book. That's all I want you to do. He says, don't do that to yourself. But I did anyways. And it was cool because the funny thing about those 2 books is the first book's a slow burn. It takes place over a period of time. You get to know the characters really well. The second book is just a kick-ass right from the beginning to the end. It takes place over the course of 2 weeks. How the first book takes place over 8 years. And wow. That's basically how I wrote it. It was like I was up at, because I had a day job, or I have a day job, I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning working until like 6, sometimes getting up at 4, and then I'd come home and then I'd work on it because I really wanted to bring it in. And because the other thing is the other book finishes on a cliffhanger, so people are expecting this other book. So I'm and I didn't even have a smick how I was going to end it. I'm like, oh my God, they're going to find out I'm a fraud, you know, like, but at the end of the day, you know, we got through it. And but that was the most anxiety riddled book that I've ever written, because I always had that in the back of my head. And really, to be honest with you, I'm the one that did it to me, because I didn't have to. Steve,
Right.
you know, they told me, just write the book. It's not, I mean, I'm not going to be allowed 5 years to write the book, but you know, I told him, I said, I'll get up every day. And he said, yeah, just relax, MJ. He said, you know, just give us another good book. That's all we want. Right. So anyway, so here we are.
I'm guessing you used a lot of what happened to you as a kid too, in your books, in your writing.
Well, I don't chronicle anything that happened to me as a kid. Certainly, I draw from some of the emotions that are involved in that. Um, a good example would be, I would say, one of the hardest pieces I ever wrote was in the Equinox, where a mother and father are they're mourning over a murdered child, and they're of course battling with each other. And that was a tough one to write, because of course it stirs memories, and how my own family was affected and all that. But I think that if you look at all of my work, yes, there's little pieces of me in there, and people that know me are going to know it, that you know, oh look, he's, you know, drawing from that. And that's what I say, that I'm somewhat of a voyeur. I watch and I process, and I'll put something in the back of the filing cabinet and maybe use it later. uh, so yeah, I don't. I joke with my wife that I'm going to write a book someday. I'm going to call it "Scars My Grandmother Left Me," but there's too many people alive to write the book yet. Because, but that's, I mean, basically, I believe I will write a memoir one day, but it will be historical for my children.
Got it.
You know, unless somebody says, you know what, we can give you movie rights and Netflix and blah blah blah. Maybe then I'll just sell out. I don't know, but quite honestly, no, I don't think so. I probably will write that kind of stuff, but it'll be memoir.
I know you have your 5th book in process. No pressure, not pressuring you.
Oh my
But
God! Oh my
you know,
God!
you wrote to me, you're 55 years old, you have your 5th book in process. You're an author, and then you know that you'll just keep going as it happens. So that's a really exciting place to be, considering it sat in a box. The first one sat in a box for 12 years. So
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that gives people a lot of hope in their own writing process, because it's not like an instant thing every single time you just pick it up and in 2 months you're, you know, Stephen King, because it doesn't happen that way.
No.
I want to end with, you have horror, sci-fi, and thriller. You have 3 genres, 4 books. If
Yeah.
someone had to buy one, well, obviously you have 2 of them are standalone.
Yeah.
Although I did already say they were series. So I mean, I'm thinking I'm manifesting that now. So where would you start? So like, I know one of your horror reviews was like, if you want to be kept up at night. That's not me. I'm not that person. Highwayman would probably scare the piss out of me, I'm guessing.
Well, it depends. Like it really does fall on what you dig. Okay, if you don't dig
Okay.
horror, then you well, I would say Highwayman, I think, often gets, you know, the horror thing put on it because of the serial killer aspect, but it's a crime thriller. So,
Okay.
but the question is, you know, how susceptible are you? Really, if you want a good standalone book, I would say read The Equinox. Even though it is a horror novel, there's a lot of native mysticism in it, and stuff like that. And it's just a cool monster story. So you
Okay.
understand the monster, but it's a fun story. So I would say read The Equinox. It's the book I wrote that gets the most love every time somebody reads it. To come back, and for some reason, and I don't want to sound misogynistic, but women seem to love it more than men do. And maybe because they fall in love with Daniel Blackbird, who's the protagonist. He's a good looking young guy, but he goes through hell. But I don't know, but it does get the most love. And although if you're into crime thrillers or anything, you don't pick your genre. Here I am, right?
Yeah, here you are, right. 4 books, just buy them all, basically. That's what
Yeah,
I'm hearing.
sure.
Just get them all. One of
That's what
each.
I say.
MJ, thank you so much for being on. Your story was really remarkable. You're my dad was a bank robber interview. So there's that. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Oh, no problem. Listen, it's been a treat. I had a lot of fun. I really did. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for joining today. It's been a pleasure. You can find me at momof18.com and on social media platforms as Mom of 18. A huge thank you to NGBN TV for sponsoring this podcast episode. And on social media platforms as Mom of 18. A huge thank you to NGBN TV for sponsoring this podcast episode. .com